I was 24 with a 2-year-old son whose father had recently relapsed on drugs. This got us evicted after him blowing through just about every dime of savings we had. Shamefully, I went back to live at my parents' house while I worked to get back on my feet. I should add that they lived in an upper middle class neighborhood on the good side of our city and had lived there for almost 20 years at this point. The night before this incident happened, I was quite restless and couldn't sleep at all, so I went downstairs in hopes that watching murder mysteries on the living room TV would lull me deep into dreamland. Yes, I am that type. My father, always a warrior, double-checked all the windows, locks, and ensured the garage door was closed, as he did every night. My mother and siblings would often tease him because of his over-precautions, especially since we felt extremely safe and comfortable in that neighborhood. He went to bed though, and I ended up falling asleep on the couch. I was awoken early next morning to the sounds of my father in the kitchen, preparing to leave for work for the day. I got myself and my son dressed, and prepared to depart for work as well. My father proceeded to head to his car in the garage, when he noticed that the garage door was already fully opened. Frustrated, he turned to me immediately and told me to always make sure the garage door was down before going to bed. I figured he must have forgotten to check it the night before or something, and shrugged it off as nothing. Since my parents utilized the garage to park their 2 vehicles, I had to park my car on the street at the end of the curved driveway. There was very little visibility of my car from the garage entrance. I pick up my son and head out the door to go to work. As I'm approaching my car though, I notice a person is sitting in the driver's seat of my vehicle. I will add that I often left my car open in case my son's now homeless father needed shelter from the rain or cold. He could always lay there in an emergency. Of course, I naturally assumed it was him at first. I opened the passenger door and leaned in, expecting him to welcome me and beg me for a ride somewhere. Instead, I see a very large, rough-looking man startle awake and stare at me. In shock, I tell him to get the hell out of my car. He then tells me it's his car and to get in so he can give me a free ride. Still holding my son, I start to scream at the man, who proceeded to move as if to grab me. At this time, a neighbor just happened to be coming down my street in their vehicle, presumably also on their way to work. I hailed him down immediately, pointed to the man, and told my neighbor to call the police, which he did right away. I finally came to my senses and realized I needed to get my son away from this situation. I retreated back inside the house and waited for the cops to arrive. It seems the man must have come to his senses as the cops were being called as well, because he ended up fleeing and crossing through some property to a parallel street in the neighborhood. The cops arrived and were unable to locate him, following the direction he went. They were then notified on radio that a car had just been stolen from a neighbor on that street. There's our guy. They ended up locating him inside the vehicle a few miles away and apprehended him. Now, finding a strange man in your car is certainly odd, but here's where the story actually gets a lot creepier. The police discovered several items on the man that were stolen from various homes in the neighborhood. It turned out they also knew of him from his history of arrests, including drug and rape convictions. During questioning, the man revealed he had been working with 2 accomplices. They were essentially going house to house and stealing from unlocked cars. The man stated that the 2 other men had split away from him, and he proceeded to get into my unlocked car, where he happened to pass out until I found him. Remember how the garage door was open the morning of, thus pissing my father off? I had a push-button garage opener in the car visor. The man opened the garage door, intending to come into the house. The couch I was sleeping on was only 10 feet away from the door that led out from the house to the garage. Who knows what would have unfolded if he didn't pass out, and my dad forgot to lock the door or something. Lesson learned in the end, I guess. Don't date guys that you need to leave your car unlocked for shelter. This happened maybe 2 hours ago or so. My roommate and I decided to take a short walk to the gas station just up the street from our house. We live in a small town in Texas, and the gas station is less than a mile up the street. We put our 2 new puppies on leashes and went for a fun walk at around 9:30 p.m. for some slushies. We successfully walked the small hill to the gas station. My roommate kept the 2 puppies since they weren't allowed inside. I went in to use the bathroom and get us both a pina colada because that's our favorite. I pay, so far everything's fine, and the female employee compliments our dogs. Nothing harmful, just a nice lady. For context, I am disabled and training my puppy to be my service animal as I need physical assistance. Well, my puppy decided she wasn't going to walk on the leash well. No big deal. I stop, tell her to heel, wait for her to listen and hold the command, then release. But my puppy was being especially stubborn today, so it took nearly 10 minutes to get out of the parking lot with this kind of discipline. I'm a relatively patient owner, and I almost always will wait for her to listen to a command. That is, until a red pickup truck pulled into the gas station. At first, I thought nothing of it. I mean, why would I? It's a gas station, I'm there with my friend, there's no reason to feel unsafe. That is, until this gigantic man steps out of the truck and yells at us, "Hey, how much for the dogs?" I wasn't comfortable answering, and my friend yelled no. He yelled once more, "I said how much for the dogs?" Of course, I started getting uncomfortable. "I got her at the pound, get one of your own, they're cheap because of overflow." I continued to walk. "I'm proud of you," he yelled. I thought to myself, proud of me? Why the fuck would you be proud of me? I don't even know who you are. I realized he was standing by his truck just staring me down. I never lived in a small town before. I've always been in the city, and this was a very low crime area. At this point, we're back on the main street of the neighborhood. I was just walking, minding my own business, until I heard a voice screaming in the back of my head, telling me I needed to get home right now. Run. Don't let him see where you live. I thought I was just being paranoid, but then I turned around. Right there were those annoyingly bright LEDs, and the same front of his truck, right behind us. The second I looked back and looked into the truck, I knew it was him immediately. He pulled over onto the side of the road as soon as I saw him. Maybe he just lives here, but that voice in my head was still eating away at me. I gave my dog full slack and moved as fast as I could, forcing a quick pace behind my friend to make her hurry without trying to scare her. We got outside of the house, and she nonchalantly walked inside. It didn't feel right though. I needed to watch, so I made my dog heel and watched for those headlights. They weren't on though. The street has very poorly lit street lamps, but I could still barely make out the body of his red truck slowly going by. It was so quiet that I could even hear his engine click back on once he started at full stop and start speeding down the road. I debated leaving and hiding somewhere else. I didn't want him to come after my friend and her dog, but there was really nowhere to go. I ran inside, flipped off the lights, and locked the door. I just stood against it waiting for him to pass. After a long while, he finally did. I told my friend what happened, and after the initial confusion came the realization that her car was parked outside the garage and unlocked. It had very obvious signs of a puppy, or at least a younger dog in the front yard as well. He'd seen what side of the road we'd walked down, and approximately what area he'd stopped seeing us walk as well. She went to lock her car through the key fob, but it was not working. There had been some attempted car break-ins in the area, so she snuck out to lock it manually. She went out, put the key in the handle, and locked the door. Rounding the corner of the house again to get back to the front door, I saw her throw herself inside and slam it shut, panicked as could be. It turned out, as she had rounded the corner of the house, she saw that red Ford come barreling down the street again. We'd been inside making sure everything is all locked. All curtains and blinds were closed since. And we kept hearing that car pass down our street over and over again. We don't think he saw which house was ours or her come back inside, but hopefully we never meet that guy in the red Ford again. Summer of 2018. I don't really remember what day it was exactly, but I do remember it was late June or some such. School had just ended, and I was elated to hang out with friends and relax after a tough year of grade 11. I really liked being home, just like any kid that goes to school, I suppose, but especially because I was failing. My family and I lived in this very small town. I spent my whole life there, and although I liked how quiet it was, I was pretty far away from all my friends. A very lonely town. Mostly all the residents were so old, you'd barely see anyone out on the streets. Maybe the odd kid every once in a while, but it was pretty desolate. My oldest brother had a pretty crazy girlfriend in our town. She was our neighbor's granddaughter, actually. She pulled the usual manipulation tactics. Luckily, my brother didn't fall for it, and eventually did break up with her. But as you can imagine, for someone like that, it was not the end of her. She and her friends ended up egging our house to hell. I'm talking dozens of eggs. It took forever to clean. A few weeks later, she left back to her town, so we never got the chance to confront her about it. My mom was pretty shaken at this though, so we decided to install cameras and light motion sensors around our house. My town had the odd weirdo or so. This one older guy that's now dead used to stalk my mom when she was working out from our backyard fence. She would catch him peering into the windows. She would also notice he would go for walks every time she would work out, so eventually she stopped. Anyway, it was June now, and my brother had just gotten accepted into a college. He was planning to play for the team. For about 6 days, my dad and brother went out to help him get situated with the new school. Now it was just me and my 18-year-old brother alone in our house. The reason my mom was so okay with this was because something like our house getting egged had not happened for a really long time. My biggest fear, actually, is home robberies. It's just scary for a place you feel so safe to change in such an instant. It was about 4 more days until my mom and dad would get back home. Everything was actually going really fine, until it suddenly wasn't anymore. It was about 1 or 2 a.m. I don't remember exactly when. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, watching a movie on my laptop, being the nocturnal child as I was. The blinds were shut, so I couldn't see anything outside. I had been watching for a while, until I noticed a white light barely poking through the blinds, and it seemed to be moving. I was confused at first, so I naturally went to see what it was through my kitchen window. My heart stopped when I saw 2 unidentifiable silhouettes with a flashlight in the back 40 behind my house, shining it into the windows. I naturally went and woke my brother up and told him what was happening. He brushed me off, saying it was probably just some people on a nighttime walk. I believed him at first, thinking it might be a reasonable excuse. But it felt off that they were pointing it directly at our house and not any others. I went upstairs to check again, but now they were long gone. I sighed deeply and felt relieved, although there was now no way I was going to get to sleep now. I sat there for about a half an hour trying to sleep, when our camera service gave me a notification on my phone saying it had just caught motion in our front yard. I was trembling with fear as I slowly checked the footage. I kept whispering to myself like a mantra, "It's just a car, it's just a car." I was right, but I wish I wasn't. I watched the footage as a white Ford slowly drove past the front of our house. When I mean slowly, I mean maybe 2 miles an hour until they eventually passed. There's no way they're driving that slow for no reason, I thought. So again, I went and showed my brother the footage, who was now a little annoyed I'd woken him up for a second time. This time, though, he took it seriously. He looked unnerved by this footage and gave me a terrified look. "How many times have they passed our house?" he asked with a shake in his voice. They had only passed once so far, at least that I knew of. My brother got up immediately and locked all the doors. something we never had to do before because of how safe our town usually was. Another 20 minutes had passed at this point. Me and my brother were watching the windows. He was watching the backyard whilst I was watching the front. Then, of course, the Ford passed by the front of our house again, slowly, until it stopped dead center right in front of it. Then it hit me. "They must think nobody's home," I said to my brother. That's what it had to be. None of our cars that were usually there were, because my mom didn't trust my brother and I going somewhere while they weren't at home. My brother came running over, and that's when it happened. 3 men jumped out of the parked truck, slowly approaching the house. I saw one had a pistol. My brother pushed me away from the door in a panic. "Holy fuck, we're being robbed!" he yelled. It made it more scary because I could hear the panic and fear in his voice. My brother, someone who wasn't terrified of anything, looking scared, petrified me. I ran back into the living room when I could hear our back door knob being rustled vigorously. My brother grabbed a kitchen knife and ushered him and I under the kitchen table. It went quiet, a deafening quiet. The silence was so loud. All you could hear was my brother and I's panicked breath. The front steps leading up to our door creaked under the weight of their footsteps. It was so quiet I could even hear that. The silence was broken when a brick came flying through our front door window. I was overwhelmed with fear. I wanted to scream. I bit down on my tongue so hard it started bleeding. My heart was in my throat. "They're in," I thought. We had wooden floors, so the floor would creak when someone stepped on it. I glanced to my brother, who put a fingertip to his mouth telling me to keep quiet. Tears were streaming down my face. A deep voice called out, "Looks like no one's here." The light in the kitchen flicked on, and I saw a man's feet from under the table. "The deck," my brother whispered. He was right. Our kitchen table was right next to the door of our deck. 2 men came bustling up the stairs. "We gotta move fast, check the whole house, and get back out to the truck as soon as possible. Don't take too long," one man said to the others. One of the men went back downstairs, while the other 2 stayed upstairs. I could hear trash bags being unfolded. My brother waited until they were out of the kitchen when he started quietly unlatching the deck door. "It's unlocked. Move fast." He ran out and I followed without hesitation. He leapt off the deck of the 2-story house. I hesitated to do so until I heard, "What the fuck?" being yelled out behind me. I immediately jumped. On landing, my ankle twisted funnily. There was so much adrenaline though, it didn't hurt until much later. My brother and I ran blindly through the dark back 40 until we got to a lit street and hid in some construction outhouses until morning. It was about an hour into the night when my ankle finally got a really sharp, persistent pain. I ran on a broken ankle. The most painful night of my life, but I somehow managed to get some sleep after all of that. It was about 7 a.m. when my brother woke me, telling me they were gone. He helped me back to the house. When we called the police, it would take a while for them to get there because we lived in such a remote town. A lot of things were missing. My phone, laptop, all of my mom's jewelry, old values she had in a china cabinet. My brother's wallet was also missing, but it turned out they hadn't taken mine. Eventually, 2 police showed up just to tell us there was nothing they could do except drive me to the hospital. In the end, it didn't even make the news. Go figure. This happened to me a few months back and is something I almost forgot about, at least until a friend reminded me of it yesterday and told me it still freaks her out. I don't blame her because it still bothers me too. Basically, I had been on a walk from my apartment to a convenience store for something around midday. It's only about a 5-minute walk, and it's right next to a college campus, so there was a lot of foot traffic. It always felt relatively safe for being in a city. I was almost to the store when suddenly a dark SUV pulled up right next to me. The driver, 25 to 30 and female, waved me down. She pointed her thumb to her back seat, then gave me a thumbs up. I got the impression that maybe there was someone I knew riding with her, trying to say hey or something. That wasn't unlikely, as I had gone to school there myself and often ran into people I know. I couldn't see anything through the car's dark-tinted windows initially though, so I called out to her. "I have no idea what you're trying to tell me, you know." "Hey, where are you heading?" she asked. Her tone was lighthearted and casual. By this point, I could see no one to my knowledge was in the back seat at all. She seemed both put together and off-putting at the same time. It was weird. She didn't quite seem young enough to be a student there. I responded honestly and told her I was just going to the convenience store. I didn't feel like there was a real reason to lie. I mean, the campus was busy, the store was busy, and again, I was already basically there. "Hey, I'm going there too. Hop in, I'll take you," she said, and again gestured to her back seat. She was being weirdly pushy, and it made so little sense to offer a ride when it was basically 30 seconds around the corner. "No, that's okay. I want to walk myself. I'm actually on the phone with my mom," I replied, which was actually true at the time. I was being polite, but I wanted to make it very clear she was interrupting something and I was not interested in her shit. She continued to drive slowly beside me as I walked though, and didn't seem fazed at all. "Don't worry, I'll talk to your mommy for you," she teased. "Come on, let's have a nice and safe drive to the convenience store." The way she said it was a little bit mocking, as if I was being unreasonable for rejecting this weird offer. "I don't even know who you are," I said, still trying to maintain a casual tone by laughing her off. She wouldn't budge though. "Come on, man, you're holding up traffic, just get in." By this time, there was a huge line of cars behind her because she was just inching along beside me the entire time. A few of them even honked because by this time, the interaction had lasted a couple of minutes. "You're the one holding up traffic because you're the one in a car," I responded more firmly. At this point, I think she realized I was not going to bite. "Alright, I'll see you at the convenience store then. Let's talk there," she said before speeding off. I got to the convenience store about a minute later. There was no sign of her or her car there though, so she never actually stopped there. I'm not sure what would have happened if I'd gotten into that car. Probably I would have never ended up there either. I don't know what she wanted from me, but I guess I looked like an easy target. In spite of being 23 at the time, I looked like I was a teenager or so. Either way, I'm glad I never found out though.